Okay, so hi, my name is Sohail Shah. I'm the founder of the After School Academy. It's a new kind of school with a new education system focused on multiple intelligences and being and self-awareness and awareness of other things. And I mean, it's a very extensive curriculum. But let's get into the questions that the parents have put in. Um, so these are questions that parents put in regarding their children. Ages vary from about 1 to 5. So we'll just jump right in. Thank you for joining us. Question number 1 comes from Mrs. Shamala Adarsh. Please suggest, yeah, the question is, and this is a child of 1.7 years. So the question is, please suggest how to start early education and improve their social ability and different skills. Okay, so Mrs. Shamala, the thing is, children develop cognitive functions to be able to really interact socially and understand social nuance at the age of around 6. So at the age of around 1.7, um, what what we could do to stimulate interaction is allow them to play with other children and make sure that as often as possible there are other children and other people who are coming to the house who are able to meet your child, and your child is able to go to a public space, meet other children. Even though they're 1.7, it's still young. And but basically, if your focus is social ability, just good interaction and involvement. So whenever you take your child out and your child you are interacting with another person, I would recommend that you involve your child in that interaction so the child understands that they are also part of the conversation. That is Mrs. Shamala Adarsh's question. And now, 1 second, sorry, I'll just adjust the. Yeah. And should I switch off that light? It's fine. That one? It says left near. No, there's left board. That, yeah. Yeah, this is great. This is also great. But I want that one also. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Yeah. Next question comes from Mrs. Shweta Nagraj, and her son is 3.8 years. My son is good if he's in a good mood and he will do his work, otherwise, he will not. And if we tell him a number of times, he will not listen. How can we avoid this? So, Mrs. Shweta, the thing is that children aren't meant to be told exactly what to do. They're very free spirited. So what happens is, and children have a lot of moods, and just like adults, and children feel them very intensely. And now the thing is, if you want your child to be able to understand their mood and be able to act, you need to allow them to feel their mood out. So on days that their mood isn't good, it is good to discuss that feeling with your child and understand why their mood is that way, rather than making them do work or not doing work. And it is very prevalent, even if you see adults, when you're not in the mood to do work, there is very little motivation other than finance or the fear of some kind of punishment that will get us to do work. So children are very natural, and children don't naturally have fear. So they will gravitate towards acting on mood rather than acting on logic. This is something that is very important to the age of 6. Cognitive function for children really starts developing at the age of 6, where they can make sense of what they feel. Until then, it is mostly just emotions without any sense of it. So allow these emotions to happen and don't try and force them to be a particular way, because there will be enough time and life for them to work on themselves. And yeah, then okay.
You can tell them a couple of questions which are related to card handling.
Yeah. So there are a couple of there are a couple of questions here which are related to card handling and your linguistics, and that all, as Mr. Raghunath is indicating, that they will be covered in a separate session. So just wanted to inform you all of that. This one also we don't do.
Yeah, that's potty training.
Oh yeah, another question comes in potty training, and this is something I'm not going to go through the question of potty training that has been asked, but this is something that generally I feel like all parents should know, that children, depending on the genetics, depending on the emotional capacity that they have at the age up to the age of 3 is what dictates bowel regulation. And so when children either have shifts in emotional security, there are changes in bowel movement and even the awareness of it. So not many children are aware that they are feeling those emotions and that their digestion process is at a particular way. So most parents feel like potty training is something that needs to be happening in the first 1 year, which is not true. It can happen sometimes over 6 years and it's fine. The more you guilt and the more you shame a child, the more that they will fear, and so what they will do is they try and hide it, and that causes even more emotional kind of a constriction, which is not good in the long term. So please allow your children to be a little more natural, and every time they do, say for example, go to the bathroom but not actually in the bathroom, you can just tell them that the next time that you feel this way, let me know, and eventually over time it's going to be eroded away. Okay. Let me see something.
Start.
Okay, this is a question by Mrs. Anita Raghunand, and her daughter is 4.5 years old. The question: she seems to be very sensitive. The child seems to be very sensitive, and she cries if anyone gets hurt, including us, and any movies with fight sequences, etc. Is it okay to be this empathetic at this age, and will it impact her future with she being this sensitive? Now the thing is, actually, this is a great gift. Children who are sensitive actually are much more perceptive and usually much higher on their creative intelligences and aptitudes. So you want to cherish sensitivity. Now also, so what happens is, if someone cries, so it generally means that they have a high amount of compassion and a high amount of perception, which is wonderful in the future for these people, especially with in the future, say in another 20 years, when your child, who's now 4.5, enters the job market. Most of the intellectual jobs will be automated, but most of the creative, the ones that require perception and sensitivity, will never be outdated by technology, and these will be the jobs that will be the most important in the future. So I think this is a great quality and a great skill, and I think it's something to be cherished. Also, yes, it does. Sense high amount of sensitivity does impact people in the future. And now, what happens is, because the world is rough and harsh, and there are very sensitive people, often they are passive, and they're not able to stand up for themselves, and they're not able to be strong in places that they need for their growth. So what happens is, as of now, it is fine, but slowly, with a good, healthy education over the next few years, next 10 years, those problems also can be avoided, because it is a matter of understanding what external factors affect our internal state of happiness. So because children are more sensitive, they absorb more, and when they absorb more, we need to then help them discern what is better for them to be around and what is not better for them to be around, with their help and together with them. Yeah. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah. All right. So sensitivity is something to be cherished, and it's wonderful. So it's not something to worry about. Just to tell you, yeah. The next question comes from Mr. Sharat, and his child is of 3.5 years, and the question is very simple and short, and it says, how to stop his arrogance. Okay, so these are a few things that, first of all, we should understand that children have a high amount of energy, much higher than adults. So that is often why you will find them asking you more questions than you can handle. They expressing more emotions that you can handle. And so what happens is, no child is born arrogant, and no child is born in a particular, has learned any particular behavior. I mean, has from before. All behavior that children exhibit are things that they see around them. The primary form of intelligence is imitation. So as you see, when children are exposed to different situations and different people, they tend to absorb their reactions and their behaviors. So if your child is behaving as if he is arrogant, it doesn't mean that the child himself is arrogant. It just means that the child is in an environment where there are where arrogance is being shown, or there are arrogant people. So changing your child's environment and making sure that in your home environment, this is the responsibility of parents, that in your home environment you create a atmosphere where people are treated verbally and physically with kindness and respect. And eventually, what happens is arrogance will start being washed out. And the thing is, it's okay also sometimes for children to be arrogant. As children grow older, their nature, their tendency to express strong emotions through anger is very natural. And the more we try and stop it, the more we are going to cause it to erupt even more and more. So the best way is to just listen without trying to say this is bad or good, and just keep changing the environment of a child. That itself will have such a great positive impact in the future. Okay. This next question comes from Mrs. Nikita Anand. Her child is 3 years old, and yeah, the question is, my son is very shy, always reluctant to talk to people, relatives. This is the case in his school too. He neither mingles nor talks to his classmates. Whereas he plays so much with his cousin and non-stop questions at home. It's so selective. And how do I make him social? So first of all, we need to realize that children have a very natural sense of who they need to interact with. And when they interact with, say, a select bunch of people, that means that they feel emotionally comfortable to share time and space and an environment with a person. Now, there are different, everybody on a scale of introversion to extroversion varies heavily. Some children are naturally introverted. Some of those naturally introverted children are highly creative and highly, intellectual geniuses. So there is actually no problem if a person is slightly more introverted or extroverted, as long as they have company from their peers. And so if your child is at least able to meet and mingle with cousins and also have non-stop questions at home, that's a great sign. And selective socialization is a very common thing. If you look at adults, all adults socialize selectively. And this is what children are doing. So it's absolutely fine. If you would like your child to talk to more people and be more open, you can get more people to visit your child in that place where they feel the safest. So wherever that be, whether it's at your home or if it's in a park or wherever your child feels safe, or with your child's cousin, if you want to, you can call one friend and maybe see how it is then with 2 friends or 3 friends and slowly test out. Never forcing your child. Remember, with children, every time you force, the reaction push is stronger because they have much more energies and their energies are much more intensified than adults. So that is it. Also, I feel like a lot of parents have a very strong or a very particular idea of what your child needs to be. And I would like you, instead of wanting your child to be a particular way and enforcing that, even though all intentions are good, I would like you to listen more to your child than to tell your child what to do. Because your child will give you insights about them that you will never know unless you listen and actually be patient enough to wait and not push your child. One of the greatest ways of parenting is actually non-interference. It seems counterintuitive, but it's actually the truth. And if you notice, children themselves will want to come up to you and tell you everything and share everything with you. So you don't have to want your child to be a particular way. Your child will themselves come and show you who they are. The next question comes from Mrs. Mamta Manjunath. The question is, my daughter is 3.1 years, but she resists to ask sorry and say please and thanks, though I practice to say it whenever I get the chance with her. So one thing that I would like to applaud you on, Mrs. Mamta, is that you do practice it whenever you get the chance with her. So as exposure to her interaction, that's very healthy. Also, the thing is, children, as I told you, they develop a sense of reasoning and cognitive function at the age of 6. So even if your child is saying sorry, thank you, and please before at the age of 3, it is not because they understand what sorry means or what thank you means or what please means. They're doing it as a function of memory or imitation intelligence. So at the age of 5, 6 is when children understand, okay, maybe I could say sorry here, and understand the value of it. So as good intentioned parents, we all want to teach our children good values. So the problem is sometimes we stuff them too fast with the values that we feel are important. So I would recommend that you still do say sorry and please and thanks with her, but do not expect your child to be a mature adult yet. It is a long process and it takes time. And many times quick solutions or quick ideas don't allow long-term growth, and that is something I feel parents should know about. So just keep being courteous in your conversation, and keep her around other people who are also courteous in their conversation, but don't expect your child, or don't feel disappointed if your child doesn't say sorry or please or thanks back, because for them to feel that, they need to have gone through certain emotional experiences in life. Okay. The next question comes from Mrs. Saujanya Shrikant, and her child is 11 months old. My daughter sucks her fingers all the time with precaution, and what precaution can be taken to reduce that habit? And she's only 11 months old. Now, the thing is, for 11-month-old child, sucking fingers is very normal. Children at this age have oral fixation, and what happens is it gives a sense of calming to the child. It's an emotional self-calming mechanism, as research in psychology would say. So when your child is at 11 months old, the emotions that they feel cannot be intellectually or cognitively processed by the mind. So the mind gets comfort in something familiar, and something familiar would be sucking on your finger or any other form of oral fixation. Because what happens is, now in our world, we don't extend breastfeeding onto a really long time. So we wean children off earlier, but children still need oral fixation to feel more comfortable emotionally. So that is something that I would recommend that you don't worry about. If it persists till the age of 3, then we can look into it, or 2. But right now, it is just a self-calming mechanism, and it's very healthy for children to go through that. Okay, the next question is by Mrs. Pratibha. It's her daughter and of 6 years. What do you do if children start hating the parents' discipline and start ignoring everything that you say? So when it comes to discipline, see, at the age of 6, children have developed a cognitive function. And what happens is, if they are hating the parents' discipline, that is usually a sign that the discipline is cutting off their emotional frequencies. Now, what happens is, when children are excited about something and they feel emotional about something, um, instead of cutting their options off and saying no, it is better to give them 2 options that you are okay with. So if a child says, I want that toy, rather than saying no, you can say, instead of that toy, we can either go here to the park, or we can go and get an ice cream. And what happens is, you give children an option to participate in their decisions and their future. And what happens is, when you discipline your child too much, you cut their freedom. And cutting freedom for a child is very harsh, because they're not able to fully cognitively understand what is the long-term reason. And many times parents don't give reasons. We just say that, this is what I want and that's it. So it is very important that, rather than operating from a disciplinarian approach, you operate from an options approach, where you give your child options that you are okay with. And I feel like that way, there is no resistance to what you say, but rather a participation of the child into the kind of ideas that, or the kind of options that will be good for both you and your child. All right, the next question comes from Mrs. Mahalakshmi. Her daughter is 5.5 years old. How can I correct the bad behavior of my child while educating her on the cons of it without hurting her feelings? And bad behavior being not sharing toys to children whom she does not want to, feeling jealous when I don't correct her cousin for the same mistake she was corrected for. And so, as you can see already, the cognitive function of your child is wonderful, because they can understand that you're correcting other people for the mistakes that they have been corrected for. So that's a good sign, first of all. Second of all, correcting bad behavior, as parents, we want to enforce a lot of values onto our children that we feel is good. And the thing is, as times change, the relevance of certain values also change. So we, understanding that, as parents, we try and do a lot of correction, and children are okay without correction. I feel like whenever they do extreme bad behavior, like hitting somebody or any act of violence or aggression, then it is a good time to step in. And for example, when it comes to bad behavior like not sharing toys, now there are many reasons why children don't share toys. One is if they've grown up as a single child, the idea of sharing a space and sharing resources has not been ingrained into their brains. So sharing is a foreign concept. Naturally, if you look at the animal world also, there is not much sharing that happens. Every being is kind of created for the function of self-service, and children are the same. And so to be able to grow your existential intelligence to the point where you see a big picture in the resources and the people and the lives of others, that takes time, and children don't have that. So there are many wonderful ways of introducing things like sharing. You can create little empathy patches, and what happens is when you ask your child to share something, you can ask them to imagine what the person who they shared it with feels, and what feelings those would make them also feel. So it is a discussion of feelings and emotions with your child rather than telling them to share or not. Because children don't understand values, and why would they? Why would they? Because they haven't had to go through the experiences that parents have had to go through, where sharing was important, or or and even things like feeling jealous. I feel like adults also still, what do you say, have issues with jealousy whenever we look at other people who are more successful, or people who have gotten off easier than us. And here, where you said that your child is feeling jealous when I don't correct her cousin for the same mistake she was corrected for, that's because your child feels that there has been a judgment on her, but not on the cousin. And that judgment on your child coming from a parent is very emotionally harsh. And your child feels like that's not fair, and that's true. So I don't think there is anything for you to worry about. And I think when it comes to good social behavior like sharing and increasing empathy, these are just a matter of being able to discuss emotions. So I feel like you should be able to discuss more emotions and make your child imagine how other people would feel in different situations, and that causes a lot of empathy. All right. The next question is from Harsha and Dhatri. I want to know the different activities for development of different intelligences in the multiple intelligence system. So the thing is, there are about nine intelligences and nine different multiple intelligences according to Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. And then there are other aptitudes. You can get all these resources on the internet. If you look, if we can go one by one, but all of these, there are thousands of activities for each kind of intelligence. You can just Google it and you will come across. I can go through a quick run for linguistic intelligence. Reading would be amazing. Writing would be amazing. Ask your child to have a journal or keep a journal. Ask your child to be exposed to different languages, as many languages as possible, because the neuron function of one language is very different from another. Grammatical structures, rules, vocabulary, memorization of vocabulary is wonderful. When it comes to, say, analytical intelligence or logical intelligence, anything that requires math, anything with numbers, anything with patterns is wonderful. When it comes to kinesthetics, any form of play, any sport, uh, any exposure to yoga, any exposure to any running around, even free play, even just for kinesthetics, is wonderful for children. When it comes to, say, interpersonal intelligence, which is between you and another person, socializing, being able to have friends come over, making your child be part of lots of groups, all of these things will help in their interpersonal intelligence. Their intrapersonal intelligence, which is self emotional, mostly to do with self-awareness, that happens during reflection. And there are lots of exercises that you can do with your child to ask them how they feel, ask them what makes them feel that way, ask them to express their emotions in words, and if not possible in words, on paper, through drawings. Ask your child to express a lot of their emotions, and be there so that you can listen to them. When it comes to naturalistic intelligence, you can take your child out to a park, ask your child to go through the content of National Geographic, Animal Planet, watch all the wonderful material that comes from Planet Earth, Blue Planet. Sorry, there's a ton of wonderful scientific um, content in the world, and it's all available online for free. So any exposure to any natural behaviors of anything in the wild, or any plants or animals, is wonderful for naturalistic intelligence. um, when it comes to musical intelligence, I would recommend that all parents at the age of 5 introduce a keyboard as a minimum into their child's life. Whether or not your child learns it or not, or chooses to go for classes, is irrelevant. Just the very fact that there are notes that are accessible to children and they can access different notes at um, their own choice, and the range of notes. What happens is, after a period of time, there's a musical encyclopedia that starts developing in your neurons, and the neuroplasticity of it will develop a whole, like a register of all music, and that will be a great foundation for whenever they want to learn music later in life also. I would encourage your child listen to all varieties of music. I know that most parents in their homes put one kind of music, or maximum two kinds of music, two genres of music, or two different languages, or one language. But I would recommend that you expose yourself and your child to all sounds and all songs and music from all over the world, and different cultures. Expose your children to as many cultures as possible, so that they understand what other people also live like and what other people have in the world. I feel like that's very important. Existential intelligence also takes time. It requires cognitive function, so I don't think that's something to worry about initially. Um, yeah, that's existential. That is, yeah, I think that covers everything. If there's anything else, you can always Google it. And I'm always here. I can just get back to you.
We'll have a separate session, maybe
Sure.
20 minutes, 30 minutes.
Sure. We can have that. Yeah. Okay. The next question comes from, I think, Mrs. Shobha Vivek, and it's about her son who's 3 years old. The question is, how do we reduce his attitude on replying back when in conversation? He understands everything that we ask, but he doesn't like to reply to all questions. And again, I would like to further kind of reiterate that children aren't what we want them to be. And I think that is a very tough thing for parents to accept. We would like our children to behave a particular way when we find it comfortable, but children aren't like that. And especially children below the age of 6 aren't able to even understand why it's important for them to be like that. So I understand that your child is showing attitude and replying back. That is something that you need to know, that is picked up. Children usually don't have attitude. No child is born with attitude, and no child understands how to reply back, or to backtalk, or to ignore. So what happens is, there is maybe your child feels put on the spot too much. Maybe your child feels like if they need to reply whenever you have a conversation. Some children like to be left alone. That's absolutely fine. Um, and he understands everything that he says, but doesn't like to reply. So that's absolutely fine also. What happens is, this is something that I would like to tell all parents, that the more you train your child, the less intelligent your child will be. Training actually reduces intelligence, because it puts your intelligence as the primary parameter, and children feel like that is what they need to be, because that is what will earn them the affection and the approval of their parents. So what happens is, if children are left to be intelligent by themselves, they outgrow the intelligence of parents eventually, in much faster ways. So I would recommend that you don't try and make your child any particular way. Even if your child doesn't reply, it's okay. If your child isn't replying at all, then there is a different concern. But your child not replying to every single question of yours is absolutely normal, and it's nothing for you to worry about. The next question comes from Mrs. Aishwarya Arjun. My daughter sucks her thumb all the time, and she's cranky, and at night she keeps waking up. So when it comes to sucking your thumb, it depends on the age. If any child up to the age of 3 sucking their thumb, it is an emotional self caring mechanism, and it's okay. What happens is, if children aren't allowed to have oral fixation at a young age, later as they grow up, they're going to crave it, and the replacements for your thumb will be many other things that will be detrimental to their health. So I say that even with, if they're sucking their thumb, it's absolutely fine. It's not a concern unless they're getting infections, unless what do you say? Unless it's a medical issue.
Biting it.
unless they're biting their nails, yes, or there's a medical issue, then it's only concern. And also it means that your child needs a lot of physical comfort and physical nurturing to feel safe and secure. So I would recommend you spending more time with your child and more physical contact. Parents, I would like to tell all of you that most of the love and affection, even though it comes mostly through words and we express as adults only through words, most of your love and affection that your child will receive will be through touch. So I would recommend that you touch your child much more, hug them more, kiss them more. It will make a big difference to their sense of security, especially emotional. The next question comes in from Mrs. Shijina Rinesh, and the question is that my son has started identifying picture cards without my help, so I'm very happy about that. That's wonderful. But he's not showing interest to present word cards. And what would you suggest? So the thing is different.
Separate. Yeah.
Yeah. As Mr. Raghunath is indicating that there will be a separate session to deal with word cards and how to introduce linguistics into your child's life. But generally, as a recommendation, I would say that children tend to show different capacities at different times. Some children access their visual intelligence earlier and their musical intelligence later, their linguistic intelligence later. So every child is very different. Yeah, I'll come to the question that Mrs. Vishwanath has just posted. Mr. Vishwanath has just posted, but yeah. So if your child doesn't show an interest in presenting words, that's fine. It's absolutely fine. And if your child shows interest in presenting something else like visual cards, absolutely fine. It doesn't mean that if they don't show word cards that there is an issue. It just means that they're not comfortable sharing certain things yet, and they're not comfortable accessing certain intelligences yet, which is absolutely fine. The faster we try and push children to grow, the shakier their foundations are. So slow and steady learning is much better than making a child kind of race to learn. Racing doesn't really, long term for children, isn't a great idea. Slow and steady, a lot of research shows that slow and steady learning tends to have longer growth periods and much deeper understandings into the fundamentals. So you don't have to worry about that. Coming to Mr. Vishwanath Ramakrishna's question, which has just come in, says, how do we stop children from biting nails? So again, anything that has to do with oral fixation it depends on how old your child is again. If your child is,
what is the age?
Yeah, if you could let me know how old your child is, but generally also I'll give you a bracket. Like if your child is below the age of 3, it's still okay. If your child is, there are some adults who bite their nails also. Obviously, there are medical concerns, but basically it means that it is a emotional self-calming mechanism that is going on. And you need to then look into why your child is feeling emotionally unsafe, or your child needs to feel what is missing from your child's life that is making them crave emotional attention, emotional involvement, and nurture. So these are just small windows into understanding your child. The real issue is not biting nails, unless it becomes a medical issue.
Sometimes they also follow, right?
Oh yes, also yeah, a lot of activities and a lot of behaviors that children exhibit are very often a function of the things that they see around them. So it's also good to look around to see who else around is doing certain activities and make sure that your child spends either less or more time in that environment. I think this is the last question that we're getting. It's from Mrs. Priyanka Suraj and Rishan. Oh, Rishan is the name of the child. The age is 1 year, 3 months. And the question is, I want my child to be more friendly and free moving. He always wants to stay with parents, don't know why. And one thing, we just got another question in, but let me finish this question. So I understand that parents have a particular idea of how you want your child to be, and I see that you want your child to be more friendly and free moving and free flowing. Some children, as I said, and even adults, they vary on a introversion to extroversion. So depending on the genetic structure, that is the psychological patterns that come through hereditary function, children are going to be either more outgoing or less outgoing. And also at the age of 1 year, 3 months, children mostly look for security. So that's why most of that they want to spend time with their parents, which is absolutely fine. It's not a concern unless your child grows up to be 4 years old and then is still not interacting with anybody and only spending time with parents. Yeah. So that these are the questions that we got previously. Now let me go to the questions that that are coming in right now. My son is. This is a question from Mrs. Rajini Ramachandra. My son is 4.5 years old and he tries to control sleep. He tries to control sleep in the afternoon because he wants to go to the park. So he watches his. He's on the phone and his mobile to control sleep, and in the evening he'll be very cranky. So, if your child is 4.5 years old, it is a matter of setting boundaries. And as a parent, it is very important to set firm boundaries, not strong boundaries and not harsh boundaries. Little loose bound, like your parameters should be loose, but it should be firm. So, if you ask your child that from this time to this time we're not going to watch this, it's something that you should stick to. And um what happens is usually children are mobile to control sleep, and in the evening he'll be very cranky. So it seems like you're saying that because he spends a lot of time on his phone in the afternoon and then goes out and plays, when he comes back he's very cranky. Generally children have high amount of energy and high amount of emotion, so it is an art to learn um, how to make use of that energy in a constructive way. So if you ask your child, like watching the mobile doesn't consume energy, it is just an input of information. If you find better ways to engage your child throughout the day or throughout the afternoon, even in a physical way or a intellectual way, they will be burning their energy more and they will be more exhausted. So you want your children to be exhausted but happily exhausted, and that therefore it already takes care of a lot of emotional fluctuations. The next question comes from Mrs. Preeti Achar. How do we mellow down our kids when they are stubborn? For example, if they see something they want to have it, we can't get everything. How do we deal with such situations? My daughter is 3 years, 10 months old. Yeah. So the thing is, Mrs. Preeti, this again comes on setting very firm boundaries. Um, yeah, so what happens is if your child wants a particular thing, they need to understand that when you say no, it means no. So the reason why they would want to be stubborn or negotiate is because that they have seen the reactions and behaviors of other people around doing the same thing. So what happens is you need to re-establish your relationship with your child and tell that child that okay, when instead of saying a strong no, you can give them better options. So you can say, we are not able to get this toy right now, but if you would like, we can go home and eat this, or we can go out and eat this. What would you like? So what happens is instantly you're distracting your child away from what they're not getting, and you're giving them options about what they can get. And those are wonderful mechanisms rather than just saying no. And we can't get that, because what happens is you understand the financials of not being able to get everything, but your child doesn't have the capacity to understand what financials mean. So when they want something, it is an emotional requirement, it is not a logical requirement. And when they don't get it, when children instantly need to be gratified. So when they're not instantly gratified, they have a lot of emotions that they don't know how to handle. So it gets expressed as aggression or stubbornness or drama, being dramatic, and that's very normal also. So what happens is in these moments, allow your child to just express it out. Don't react to the expressions of anger or stubbornness, but just tell them in a cool, calm manner that this is not what we're getting, and instead we can do this or that, and you can choose. So, and give them two options that you are okay with rather than telling them no. That will be a much better, what do you say, solution for the long term and for the betterment of your relationship with your child. The next question comes in from Mrs. Pradnya Talwar. My daughter is 2.9 months old, so she's almost 3, and she doesn't pronounce R. Instead of R, she pronounces Ya. Example, Ram is Yam. How to make her pronounce R? I would like to also tell you that this is really not a problem. Some children, if you're worried about the linguistic capacity of your child, I don't think one letter is a concern. And I feel like it is okay. A lot of people, especially at the age of 3, don't understand how certain words or certain letters need to be pronounced, and that's fine. Some children have a lisp. It's fine. I don't think this is a area for concern, unless at the age of maybe 15 your child is still not able to say r and says yeah instead. Then that is a matter of concern. But until for a long while, there is no real worry about letters and pronunciation of letters. That's
No
absolutely
corrections required.
no corrections required, I think, unless you're, because at the age of 3, what is most important is that your child is having fun and your child is enjoying themselves. So correcting your child, what happens is, unless it is absolutely productive or absolutely necessary, I would recommend that you don't over interfere with your child's natural process of growth, but rather try and understand how your child is growing naturally and support it. That would be a much greater impact for the future. If there are any other questions, you can please send them in. I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, these are all the questions that have come in so far. I hope I was able to help. And yeah, Mr. Raghunath will.
Hello, dear parents. Finally, we have come to the end of the session, and I'm extremely happy that Sohail Saad has put in some time with us, okay, which has been pending for quite some time. See, most of the questions were taken, except that there are a couple of questions on card handling. The card handling is an entirely different aspect of child development, which we are providing, and that shall be addressed at an individual level. Okay, so whenever we have sessions like this, when we are inviting our guest speakers, they might not be able to in a position to take it on a regular basis. So anything regarding the card handling, you need to get in touch with the trainer who has trained you in that particular aspect. I would suggest that it is done individually. Okay, maybe we can do it on a Zoom training wherein about 5 to 6 parents having the similar problems, they can come on those issues and come online and get it done. And regarding the potty training and the thumb sucking, in continuation with what Sohail has explained, there is also a particular technique called a sleep learn technique. I think the sleep technique, if you remember, it was covered during the first day of the training. That's a wonderful method what we can avoid any kind of bad behaviors. Most of the things like whatever these trainers speak about, that can be handled in that particular manner. But in case if they are not working, one of the best options in the methods what we have is sleep learn technique. I would suggest that you try it out, and you also get in touch with your trainer individually, or we might come up with another session only to explain what is a sleep learn technique and how it can be done. And that is going to be done only for the parents who are part of our program, as you all know. And we have another question which has come up, Sohail. One more question. My son is 4.5 years. He is not ready to accept defeat. When we play May game, he would like to win always.
Yeah. I will just take this one also.
You can hold it.
I'll just put it like that if that's okay. Hi. Yeah. So what happens is, this is a very interesting topic, because I think even adults are not ready to accept defeat. I don't think anybody is. I think one of the strongest driving forces for people and for children is to win, and winning gives a very strong emotional incentive to perform at a higher capacity than you would normally. But what happens is, defeat and winning are both very important. So what happens is, whenever your child, I would recommend that your child takes part in lots of events and lots of competitions where there is winning and losing. Because what happens is, if you win and lose enough number of times, you learn to do it gracefully. And another thing is, whenever your child is losing, they are experiencing negative emotions. And as a parent, it is very important for you to not instantly try and put out those emotions. A child needs to be given the time and the space to feel those emotions without you trying to, as parents, because we don't like to see our child unhappy, we tend to quickly, for example, if my child lost a swimming competition and if they're crying, our tendency would be, okay, you know what, forget about that, let's go and get an ice cream, to distract your child from negative emotions. And what happens is, later in the future, it causes a pattern that every time your child experiences negative emotions, they need a distraction to deal with it. And instead, I would recommend that you allow your child to feel the loss, and you allow your child to share the win. So what happens is, just by that, they become more emotionally stronger, because it is something that they need to do. They need to go through negative emotions. If you want, you can help them in expressing their emotions by asking them, what do you feel, and what does that make you feel like, and can you express it in words, and can you express it in drawing? And if you can do that, that's wonderful. But what happens is, it is very important for a child to learn to win, very important for a child to learn to take defeat, and it's very important for parents to not try and interfere. If your child is not ready to accept defeat, that is where your child is at emotionally, and it's okay. It's okay to leave your child. Let your child not be okay with defeat, so that in the future they will be okay with it. But if we try and constantly and quickly take care of our children's emotions, we will not allow them to take care of their own emotions later in the future when you might not be there. So I think that is one thing. Just expose them to more competition and more situations where there is play, there is winning and losing, and allow them to deal with their own emotions. Yeah, that's, I think, the.
Yeah, that brings us to the end of this session.
Sorry.
And any more questions, I would be happy to take it forward in the next session when we're going to have. And sooner or later, we're going to be announcing our next session also. We are planning to come out with homeschooling. That is a topic which we are contemplating. And most of the parents have expressed their concern in terms of knowing more about the educational system. And when it comes to educational system, I'm happy to say that I want Sohil to share about what he is into. He runs a beautiful concept called After School Academy, which will be very much useful to the parents who are staying in this part of the town. That is, I'm talking about Saka Nagar in Bangalore, north of Bangalore. It is situated in Tindlu area, Vidyanapura and Kodigehalli. People who are staying in and around, maybe in the range of around 4 to 5 kilometers, it will be very useful to them. And I would suggest that you people, I'll be leaving in the comment section his address and his phone number if required, and also his Google Map. People who are interested, like what he does, I want him to share his thoughts on what he does here. But it's a wonderful thing. In fact, I put my child here, my son, my second son, who is around 8 years. And after he finishes the regular schooling system, he comes here around 4:35, and he spends time till around 8 o'clock. Okay, and it's a wonderful improvement what I have seen, because we are looking at the education system. What is happening today is entirely outdated. Okay, like we all know, most of the parents know. And one step what you people have taken forward by taking our program is, you people are thinking beyond your education, your child's education, because the child requires a lot of other aspects, not only the education. It's not like it's not a compulsion for every most of the parents what when we were young. Okay, there are a lot of things there are a lot of options which are coming up in the future. I want you people to keep your ears and minds open. And with this, we come to the end of the session. And before we wind up, I want to request Sohail to share what actually he does in school, after school academy. And he's also planning to come up with a full school system. That's an alternative school system. And more we'll be able to discuss after the next session. Okay, over to Sohail now.
Hi. Yeah. So currently we're in the After School Academy, and it's a new education system that is set up for parents who might find that the current system of education that you might be sending your child to is not doing justice to the kind of potential that your child has. Most education systems are based on the predication, the understanding that memorization of information is primary. Oh yes, Mrs. Pradnya, you can also ask a question about your son who's 10 years old. Absolutely. I've taught children, and right from the ages of 5 to adults to the age of 55. So any question in between is absolutely fine. So anyway, coming back to the school, our after school academy is 1 year old, and we work on developing multiple intelligences rather than memorization and a wastage of the neurons in children. Children are fantastically intelligent, more intelligent than adults, and with the use of technology, Wi-Fi, all our learning resources, in the methodologies that we have learned from different education systems from across the world, from Finland, from America, we use the best practices to make sure that children are able to develop holistically and in a long-term way. Most schools, when they do, is their duty to a child that a teacher usually takes up is about a year. And our duty to children in the truest sense of education is for the rest of their life, to prepare them for a world that even we are not prepared for. which means that we have to support all their ways of growth and expose them to all sorts of intellectually stimulating and creatively stimulating challenges. And so After School Academy is just a place where we do just that. And from this coming January, from 2020 onwards, we'll be starting a day school where we have developed our own curriculum, which allows children to have a personalized curriculum rather than a standardized one. So children also get to take part in deciding what they want to learn and what interests them, and so do teachers, and so does the school itself. So this is a wonderful opportunity for parents who are homeschooling their children and believe that the current education system in regular schools isn't up to the mark, and it's not. And if they would like to try out a new system of education where there is focus on the overall development and personalization of an education rather than a standardization, so please feel free to get in touch with me. I'm sure Mr. Raghunath will give you all the details. It's called the After School Academy. You can Google it in Bangalore, in Saka Nagar, and we'll be taking smaller children from January onwards. From January, one question by Mrs. Preeti says, so for the day school that will be opening from January onwards for smaller children, children from the ages of 3 onwards we will be taking, and we take children up to the age of 15. So anybody from the age of 3 to 15, whether they go to a conventional school or they are homeschooled or they are unschooled, we have all programs for all sorts of children, depending on all sorts of whatever schedule the parents have set up, so that your child can get the best out of learning while their neurons are fresh and developing. And that is it. Thank you so much. And all right, have a wonderful night. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.